I think it's pretty funny because a few weeks ago when the Russell Westbrook and Johnwall trade rumors were first surfacing, and there were reports that the trade could maybe happen, that the Wizards and Rockets kind of had some mutual interest. I actually made a script and I want to talk about what the Rockets might look like and what the Wizards might look like if that trade actually were to go down. But after writing the script, I kind of thought about it and I was thinking, this trade probably isn't going to happen. The likelihood of it happening is pretty low. It seemed like the Rockets wanted to at least try to keep Russ and Harden together for the time being, and I just thought that a trade would not end up going down between these two teams. And then, what do you know? They end up getting traded for one another, and now John Wall, he's on Houston, and Russ, he's in Washington, and it's shocking. I mean, I would not have expected to see Russ in Washington after last season ended. Wow, that's just crazy, and it really messes up my predictions because I mean, I had the Wizards finishing about like 11th or so in the East with John Wall, but now with Westbrook, I don't know. They're going to be competing for a playoff spot, so I want to get more into the details of this team and talk about where I think this team is going to finish now with Russell Westbrook. So I think the first thing we have to ask ourselves is if this is a talent upgrade for the Wizards. As much as I love John Wall, the truth is that he's had two major injuries and he hasn't played a game in almost 2 years. So I think it's safe to say that Wall probably won't be 100% his first year back. Whereas Westbrook, he's coming off one of the better stretches of basketball of his whole career. After that Capella trade, Westbrook averaged 29.4 points on 50.8% shooting from the field. With PJ Tucker at center, Westbrook had by far the most spacing of his career up to that point, and he was able to get to the rim pretty much whenever he wanted. And on top of that, he started shooting less threes per game, which was really nice to see because it helped with his efficiency a lot. So let's say the Wizards have a starting lineup of Russell Westbrook, Bradley Beal, Troy Brown, Davis Bertans, and Thomas Bryant. Westbrook would have arguably even deadlier shooters around him than he did in Houston. Bradley Beal shot 35% on 8 attempts per game, but earlier in his career when he was more of an off-ball player next to John Wall, he had multiple seasons shooting 40% from 3. Thomas Bryant, sorry, I almost said Thomas Bertans. Thomas Bryant, he shot 40% on 2 attempts per game, and Bertans, he shot 42% on just under 9 attempts per game. And then Troy Brown, he shot a respectable 34% from 3 on 2.5 attempts per game last year. Westbrook's best skills are attacking the rim, collapsing the defense and finding shooters, and playing in the pick and roll. I already talked about the spacing and shooters that Westbrook will have, but he's also going to have two bigs in Bryant and Bertans that can both roll and pop effectively. I like the fit of Troy Brown at the small forward over Avdia or Hachimura, just because he can shoot it a little bit. Hachimura, he was not a great shooter his rookie season, and one of Avdia's projected weaknesses coming into the league was his outside shooting ability. On top of that, these guys will get more opportunity to shine coming off the bench. If you put them in the starting lineup with Westbrook and Beal, there's a good chance that they fade into the background and they don't get as much opportunity to try certain things in the game and really just develop skills that they could develop if they just have more opportunity and aren't, like I said, kind of fading into the background. So for those reasons, I believe those guys will be coming off the bench, but they'll still probably be getting about 25 minutes per game or so. This is a great fit for Westbrook individually, but a lot of people wonder if the team will have a lot of success. Last year, the Wizards were third in the league in passes made per game, meaning that their offense was predicated on ball movement, but on the other hand, the Rockets were 29th in the league in passing, and historically, Westbrook-led teams have ranked near the bottom of the league in passing. After Kevin Durant left the Thunder, OKC finished dead last in the league in passes per game for all 3 years that Westbrook was considered the number one guy. Yeah, the Thunder were able to make the playoffs all 3 years, but they lost in the first round each time. It just goes to show that unless you have a LeBron James level talent on your team, you need to move the ball in order to win playoff games. Scott Brooks, back when he was in OKC, he would always get a lot of criticism because his offensive system appeared to be give Westbrook and KD the ball and pretty much let them do what they want with it. Considering that Westbrook wanted out of Houston so that he could play on a team where he could be the primary ball handler, I have a feeling that Washington won't be moving the ball as much as they were last year, at least not when Westbrook is in the game. Then I think we need to ask ourselves what this trade means for Bradley Beal. When John Wall was playing in Washington, there were all these rumors saying that he and Beal didn't like each other and they didn't like playing with one another. However, in a 2017 interview, Wall said, "We never disliked each other. There are times on the court where you're going to dislike a player. You want the ball, they want the ball." It's clear that John Wall's trade request this offseason came as a result of him just having an ego and still kind of viewing himself as the franchise player. But because Beal played so well these past 2 years with John Wall out, he emerged as the franchise player for this team, and it looks like jealousy is what ultimately drove them apart. The thing is, Westbrook wanted out of Houston for the same reasons pretty much. He was friends with Harden, but he obviously didn't like having to share the ball as much as he did with Harden. Beal did play off the ball quite a lot when John Wall was in his prime, but these past 2 years, Beal has gotten a taste of what it's like to be the primary ball handler. So who knows, maybe Beal wouldn't be so willing to give up that role to Westbrook. Regardless of how good the chemistry between these two players will be, the truth is that Scott Brooks will have to stagger their minutes. Other than Westbrook and Beal, this Wizards team doesn't really have anyone else that can create their own shot. If Brooks is smart and actually does that, I could see the Wizards team being better on offense this year than they were last season. Last season, the Wizards finished 15th in offensive rating. This year, I could see them sneaking into the top 10. This team's biggest weakness, though, is on the defensive end. They were, a really bad defensive team last year. They had the worst defense in the league, and they have essentially the same roster as they did last year. Obviously, they brought in Westbrook, and Westbrook over Isaiah Thomas is definitely an upgrade on defense for the simple fact that he's not undersized. But Westbrook isn't exactly an elite defender. Other than Westbrook, he brought in Robin Lopez, he's okay on defense, I guess, and after looking at this clip, I think Denny has a lot of work to do on defense. I don't think that Westbrook and Beal are going to hate each other. I think that Westbrook has actually been well liked by teammates for the most part, whereas Wall hasn't. But I just have a feeling that Westbrook's reckless, ball-dominant style of play is ultimately going to have Bradley Beal questioning if they can compete in the East. Assuming Scott Brooks can be a half-decent head coach and this team doesn't have any major injury issues, I could actually see this Wizards team making the playoffs. Before this trade, I had the Hawks as the 8th seed and the Wizards as the 11th, but I think Westbrook makes them good enough to get into the playoffs. So I've got Washington as the 8th seed, finishing at 500 with a record of 36-36. I've had to change up some of my standings predictions just because of some of the trades that have gone down, which actually caused me to give the Hawks one more win than I was originally going to give them, but now they're the 9th seed. The Wizards will be a fun team to watch this year. They'll be a top 10 offense, and they'll probably be a bottom 5 defense as well, so their games are going to be very high scoring. Not to mention the Wizards had the 7th highest pace in the league last year, and adding Westbrook will only make their pace even faster. Best case scenario for the Wizards, Westbrook and Beal fit greatly together, and they don't really get jealous of one another. Hachimura and Avdia develop really well, and they fill out the rest of the roster with good defensive players. The East is pretty wide open, which is probably why Washington made this move on top of the fact that they just had to get John Wall out of there. But I think the ceiling for them is likely a second round exit at any point over the next 3 seasons.